Today I want to tell you exactly how to train when you have tennis elbow. So first, I don't want to get too far into the details on what tennis elbow is, what causes it. Let's just briefly go over that because it wouldn't be a video about tennis elbow if I at least didn't tell you what it was and what causes it. So again, the skinny version of it is tennis elbow is inflammation in your elbow, usually caused by some type of dysfunction in your forearm. Most of the time I see it caused by a load management error. Namely, somebody is doing way more than they can recover from. They do it for a certain amount of time and eventually tennis elbow develops. Now that we got that out of the way, again, it wasn't super detailed, I understand that, but this video is about how to train with tennis elbow. Let's get into how you should train when you have tennis elbow. So first things first, if something aggravates your tennis elbow, let's say it hurts, whether it's too much weight, whether it's a certain exercise, don't be afraid to remove it or at least drastically change how you do this exercise in your program. That way you aren't prolonging the recovery process. Now that that's out of the way, let's go over how you should train when you have tennis elbow. The first thing is gonna be tempo reps. I actually started doing this for my squat, not injury related. I did it to basically make sure that my bar path was as linear as possible, but then I started actually doing it with my bench when I was suffering from tennis elbow. So you do a tempo rep by just taking a lighter weight. It doesn't have to be excessively light, something that isn't gonna bother your elbow, and you just take it through a tempo. I like to do a 3-second eccentric when I'm lowering the weight. I pause on my chest, 3-second concentric when I'm raising the weight, and I actually do that until I feel a little bit of fatigue. The important thing is you're really focusing on your technique. Tempo reps are great for improving your technical proficiency in a lift, and now is a great opportunity to improve that technical proficiency because you can't lift that heavy and you can't lift that explosively. Again, guys, I encourage you to do tempo reps on some of the exercises that you're struggling with regardless, but now's a perfect time to take advantage of it for certain compound movements of the upper body that might aggravate your tennis elbow. Things like the bench press, things like the overhead press, maybe even certain upper back variations like a barbell row. You can do tempo reps with this. It's still gonna stimulate your muscle. Again, probably not the same way as when you're lifting heavy and explosively, but it's still gonna stimulate your muscle. And at the very worst case scenario, you're gonna maintain, if not build, some technical proficiency in these exercises. Look, if you've made it this far in the video and you haven't liked the video, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Now let's get into the second thing that you can do to train when you have tennis elbow. That's gonna be occlusion training. So this was almost a fad for a little bit. There were people that were trying to occlude any type of muscle that they were training because they thought that it would give them superior results to conventional training. I don't believe that's the case. I think occlusion training is best utilized while you're injured or while you're dealing with something like tennis elbow. Occlusion training is rather simple. All you need to do is tourniquet above the muscle you're trying to train. It doesn't have to be crazy tight. You want some blood flow, you just want to restrict the blood flow. You don't do this throughout your entire workout. You do it when you're just doing the isolation movements or the movements that you're doing for that specific area. I don't keep this tourniquet on the entire workout. I just keep it on for 15 to 20 minutes when I'm doing my isolation work, my biceps and triceps on the side that I actually have tennis elbow. I don't recommend it for compound movements. I think it's best left for isolation movements. But this is a perfect opportunity to take advantage of this tool in your toolbox. Use the occlusion training because it's a great way to preserve muscle mass. Look, I don't believe and I don't see any good evidence that suggests that occlusion training is superior to conventional training. But I do think there's good evidence to suggest that occlusion training is great for maintaining muscle mass while you're dealing with an injury. And last but not least, make sure you're training everything else the same as you always have. So when you have tennis elbow, I guarantee you can still squat, you can probably still deadlift, you can probably still hit traps, you can definitely still hit abs. You might be able to do some isolation chest work. Work out what you can. Just because one area is injured doesn't mean you can't take care of the rest of your body. Let's touch a little bit on nutrition. I know that's not really what we're talking about here. I wanted to really talk more about training, but I would be remiss if I didn't at least touch on nutrition. Understand that training and nutrition go hand in hand, so let's talk about that briefly. Let's say you're somebody in a bulk and you're dealing with some pretty severe tennis elbow that started halfway through it. My best suggestion is if you can't hit your muscles hard enough to stimulate growth. That's the purpose of the bulk, right? You're trying to gain muscle mass, not just a whole bunch of body fat. I'm gonna say lessen your calorie surplus or just eat at maintenance. Again, lessen that surplus or eat at maintenance because you can't adequately deliver the stimulus to your upper body necessary to continue to aggregate muscle mass. If you're somebody that's in a deep calorie deficit, the same thing applies. You wanna maintain as much muscle mass as possible while you're in a cut, so just lessen your calorie deficit a little bit or eat at maintenance. Again, you need to stimulate the muscle so it sticks around. Really, the only caveat I would have is, let's say you're somebody that's severely overweight. Well, I mean, it's a cost-benefit analysis there. If you're very, very overweight, get as much body fat off as you can. Again, you want to preserve muscle mass, but if you're very, very overweight, that comes secondary. Lose the body fat, continue your calorie deficit. So in short, let's just touch on everything. Tennis elbow is inflammation in your elbow, usually caused by overworking that area. There are a couple different things that you can do to continue to train when you have tennis elbow. The first one is take advantage of tempo reps. Worst case scenario, you just get better at the technique. The second method you can use is occlusion training. This is not superior to conventional training, but this is perfect to use while you're injured. The last part of training, just make sure you're training everything else that you can. You can probably still squat and deadlift among other exercises, and these are still heavy hitting exercises. And last but not least, let's talk a little bit about nutrition. If you're somebody that's trying to gain or lose weight, if you're in a pretty large, substantial calorie surplus or substantial calorie deficit, maybe just lessen that surplus and deficit respectively. That way you can maintain as much muscle mass as possible or grow as much muscle mass as possible. The only caveat being is if you're extremely overweight, then I would say just continue with the calorie deficit. You need to get that body fat off of you. Again, guys, I'm Alex Wallace. This is Wallace Training Systems. If you like the video, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.